Welcome to the Daily Objective. It is day 22 of the war in Israel. Yeah, I think this is a slightly different episode from ones we've done so far. I think day 22 has been the best day, if you can say something like that about a war. But certainly the closest to anything we would advocate, although quite a distance from where we are. And of course, um, whatever the situation in Gaza is now in terms of targets that have been destroyed, it is far less than we would have done on by day two. But let's get to a few updates. This is the main news, but let's get to a few much less interesting updates quickly. Uh, I think this is relevant to mention because I mentioned Turkey's prime minister, president, sorry, Erdogan. I forget what title he currently holds. Yeah, I mentioned the issue in 2009 with the flotilla and the response back then. Erdogan has always been an enemy of humanity, and Israel being the closest thing to fully realizing humanity and the human spirit in that region is his number one target. So yeah, he has spoken again, spoken out about Israel, calling Israel, accusing Israel of war crimes. People in Israel are now saying, in the government are now saying they're re-examining the relationship between Israel and Turkey. That's good to know, but let's see what that re-examination results in. There are more rockets, and this will also is important to note in the context of what we're saying is a positive, positive shift that we've seen. Yeah, there are more rockets even towards the center of Israel. Some of them hit buildings. There are injuries, and
I
yeah,
saw
yeah,
an apartment building in Tel Aviv that was
yeah.
just completely smashed in. So rockets are penetrating the protective shield and get hitting. So you guys are still getting the alarm, still having to go down into the shelters, and rockets from Gaza are still hitting Tel Aviv. Uh, and I hear even within the last hour, there's still rockets being fired despite the ground incursion that started.
Yeah, so yeah, there is that, and we can that's a good segue into our main topic, which is the ground operation. Now, we said yesterday that over the previous two nights there have been ground operations where ground troops went in, did whatever they did, went out. Now there was something similar, but much more extensive as far as we can tell. Again, we don't have all the details, and that's for the better. And and they've stayed within the Gaza Strip. Now, within the Gaza Strip probably means not within the any area that's built that where there are any buildings. It's probably near the fence. I think that's also where they operated. I don't think they went into any any areas where people live or lived because that's much more difficult to just go in and do and then come out. But there's also been more aerial strikes than usual and seemingly better ones. So some of these videos, by the way, I recommend looking them up. They're much more enjoyable than other videos we've said that people should look up. And like there's many of them are released by the IDF. This is what the IDF wants you to see, and they're not going to show you what they don't want you to see. There's one that I'm guessing just from the positioning of it is somebody in Gaza filming. Uh, and you see like a row of bombings of with what I can only assume are bunker busters. And actually, maybe this was may have been Israel tweeting it, but from a Palestinian or some Israeli Twitter account. Yeah, basically blowing up a tunnel. So, and this is in a residential area, and of course, Israel wants to avoid hitting buildings, and they managed to avoid hitting buildings with those bombings. So it's impressive to see. Again, I wouldn't focus on attempting to avoid hitting buildings, but that is what Israel is doing. But yeah, just as a general point, Israel is doing more right now than they were before. Uh, if this continues, it continues to, let's use the word escalate, and Israel does more and more, I think that's a very positive thing. It's certainly a move in a positive direction. James, your thoughts from what you've seen so far from Israel over the last 24 hours or so.
Your evaluative comment, though, about the pictures being better, I had to smile, and the first time I've smiled about anything, I have to admit, it is the first time I've smiled about anything in the region for 3 weeks now. So, my wife and I made the comment as we could see the explosions in Gaza going off, and the comment she made to me, I had to say, "What pretty lights!" Finally, so they did look like powerful bombs going off, and it did look like they were hitting areas. And we know, come on, Hamas has used hospitals and schools and residential areas. That's where they put their military stuff. That's where the tunnel openings are going to be. And they cannot hold back, even if it's a residential area. And it's good to see that happening. It's good to see that there's more incursions happening as well. So long as, I mean, it's been 3 weeks, we've been kind of waiting for something. And as you referred to earlier, I mean, within the first week, both of us were really disappointed, but at least 3 weeks later, there's something going on, and let's hope that it goes well. I am still concerned for IDF soldiers because I'm pretty sure that Israel didn't, in fact, doesn't have the political will to make the ground as safe as it probably ought to be before ground troops go in.
Yeah, so a part of the reason that this is a much more positive show than any we've done in the past 22 days is, yeah, on the one hand, Israel did say that dozens of Hamas terrorists have been neutralized in this operation. One of them is the head of or the person in charge of their aerial operations, and that is of course the person who's in charge of the paragliders that we've seen, and yeah, that's a person who is you know um, the world is better off without,
Well,
and so
yeah,
yeah, so but the other thing that the IDF made a point of announcing is that nobody was killed or injured on the IDF side, which of course that's a big part of this being a very positive day, or nearly a day, and of course we very much hope that continues. More dead terrorists, no more injured or dead Israelis. That is the best case scenario. I don't know how likely it is, but let's
let's
enjoy the moment while this is the case.
I'm an atheist, but I'll use the word. I'm praying that that continues to happen, um, that we don't see casualties on the IDF side. And you jokingly say sometimes, Razi, that Hamas listens to our broadcasts, and it may well be true. But I have to say, I was also pleased, since we're talking about better news. In the last couple of days, pundits and even United States senators seem to be echoing some of the concerns that we've been raising here about Iran, ridiculing our defense minister for saying the attacks on our bases had nothing to do with this. So there's I don't know who's listening to us, who's not listening to us, if we have influence on US senators or something, but I heard some better language about Iran happening from some pundits and even some senators. It's not just a weird group of military or foreign policy experts talking like us. It's actual senators and mainstream pundits in America who were echoing my concerns, for example, about Iran, in much the same language we're using. So I was kind of blown away.
Were any of the senators from the ruling party?
No, unfortunately not.
Yeah, although I do think this is one of those issues where it's a less controversial issue, at least in terms of the mainstream of both parties. Now, I'd like to see it more controversial in the sense that I'd like to see one party, I don't care which, be more aggressive towards the enemy. but I think there is consensus that we're dealing with enemies. Actually, I don't know to what extent that was the consensus around Iran before October 7th. I think that's more the consensus now. I don't think Joe Biden is working on an additional, sending them additional money, as far as I know. So,
I think his
yeah.
Iran policy is collapsing before our eyes, and that is one of the wonderful things we're seeing. I'm given at least some indication that people in the White House are rethinking their entire policy towards Iran. And obviously, but here we are 3 weeks on, and I'm finally getting word from the White House that they're rethinking their Iran policy from the ground up. Well, yeah, it's their Iran policy, as I've said, that helped make this happen. But that I'm hearing more and more and more Republican senators, and I know it's a very close Senate, and senators have a big influence, but they're not in the ruling party. But I'm hearing more and more Republican senators take that line. Something must be done to neutralize Iran. That's the important thing America do right now, is to contain and neutralize Iran so that Israel can do what they need to do with Hamas.
Yeah, and while I would generally like to see, policies on every issue move towards freedom, I know that's not how politics works. And if Republicans can vote for some bullshit Democrat law in exchange for getting rid of Iran, I'll be happy enough with that. Thank you, Bonnie, for the super chat. Thank you, Mark, for the super chat. Your comment about praying got equal to reality to say if there is any supernatural force, let them protect the IDF. I mean, if there is any supernatural force, I'd like to see, what happens when Hamas people go there and well, we don't know what happens, but if they don't get their virgins, they're going to be angry. By the way, we talk about Hamas watching. I don't think they're watching now because I've heard there's some Wi-Fi issues. Maybe if somebody else watching can get a technician over to Gaza and fix that for them. I heard there's a yeah,
But
there's a
again, I understand if there's intentional breaking down of communications in the Gaza right now. Israel has every right to stop any kind of electromagnetic communications going on in that area, to control them, monitor them, do whatever they think is best, as I say, to protect IDF forces as this starts happening.
yeah, and it's once again one of those moments where you say, it's good that it's happening, but why only now? But then again, look, if this was what was being prepared the whole time, and uh the next big thing is coming, and this is another stage. So yeah, let's look at this as something we can hope for the best, and hopefully tomorrow we're not going to be here saying, this was a few nice hours of operations by Israel, and now they're back to.
One test for me, and I know it's a minimal one, it's the one you mentioned earlier. Are the rockets still coming from Gaza into Israel? And, as I say, I saw that apartment building smashed. And so long as that kind of thing can still happen, we obviously have not begun to neutralize Hamas. But all Israelis are still in threat, it seems to me, so long as that happens. And until those rockets, and frankly, rockets stop from the north too. Frankly, it's only when those rockets stop that I will begin to get a sense that a handle is being begun to be gotten on this situation.
Yeah. Thank you, Gail, for the super chat. Thank you, Jonathan, for the super chat. Yeah, when we look at just generally how these so-called rounds have been fought in the past. This is 3 weeks in. Usually, people would be like, okay, it's if it's not already over, why is it not over? And let's people in Israel. I'm not talking about people who hate Israel in the West. Now, people in Israel are like are waiting for more. They want more. Now, again, that more could end up in a disastrous ground operation, but it could also be in part, involve at least very heavy aerial bombardment, similar maybe to what we saw last night, but a bit more. And then a ground operation that cleans up whatever's left in there. So Yeah, we have more hope now than we did yesterday when I think the only war that Israel was fighting was the PR war by talking about the hospital and saying we know the terrorists are there, which is of course, the only question it raises is why are you talking to the press right now instead of getting rid
Right.
of them, the
Exactly.
terrorists.
I really don't want to hear about military plans. I don't want to hear about details from the IDF or the Defense Ministry right now. I want them to do more than talk. I'd rather be ignorant of something clever going on and find out about it later when I've heard that Hamas has been neutralized. Um,
Yeah, yeah, and we talk about. I thought yesterday. Actually, read the super chat by Frank who says protesters near Brooklyn Museum where many Jews live. Yeah, I think I read that this was coming. I was just about to say. Um, Yesterday, I was assuming today's episode would be about the massive protest in London. I haven't really followed what was going on there, but there is a massive protest. I'm glad there's more, action by Israel to piss them off. Of course, I'm scared about what might happen here. I think again, we talk about we had an episode talking about how to talk to an anti-Israel protester, and kind of my I
Rome,
started that episode with saying don't. But yeah,
got Rome, Lisbon, London, Brooklyn, all within the last 24 hours have erupted with thousands of people taking to the streets against Israel. That is the bad news. I lived in Brooklyn for a while. There's a large Jewish community in Brooklyn, and they're going out of their way to be as loud and obnoxious and anti Semitic as they possibly can be, even in New York City. That is still of grave concern to me. This appears to have awakened some of the most ugly anti-Semitic tribalism that's been festering out there. And that's a disgusting element of this, but uh, a discussion for another day.
yeah. But I was gonna say, we wonder sometimes if there are reasonable people who might be honestly mistaken about this. I have trouble talking to people who have any level of, even saying both sides or whatever. I People who follow me on Twitter may have seen a tweet of mine that went viral. Not as in really viral, but viral by the standards of somebody with 800 followers. Got like 200 something thousand views, mostly because it was a tweet about a somewhat well-known British leftist who then replied to me. And if you look at the comments there's last I checked, there was 110 comments, but that was like over an hour ago. I'm sure there's more now. Uh, so many of these comments are so vile, and of course Twitter is not exactly the place where you think the best people show the best of themselves, uh but it does it does tell you a lot about what the thinking is among these people, other than being called Nazi a few times, which I'm at this point used to. Again, being called a Nazi by socialists who want to kill all the Jews is special. But just the general way of thinking, and I scroll through some of that just to see if there's anything semi reasonable. It's difficult to find. I'm still looking. If there is, I will actually reply to that. But yeah, if you do find people who are semi-reasonable and somehow taken in because they're used to watching the news from whatever crappy news source that is reporting the way most news outlets are reporting this, certainly in the UK, then yeah, definitely share our content with them, and let us know, by the way, if you do encounter such people, what those conversations are like. I think that's an interesting thing to explore as we continue covering uh, this topic and basically nothing else on the channel.
Very much so. Do give us feedback on that. That was fascinating. And Twitter is a kind of a hostile landscape, but it's also one with a huge reach still. Whatever Elon Musk has done to it, it's still got a huge reach. And so you get a lot of the nastiest, but also some of the more insightful um, uh, And just to measure our effectiveness, congratulations, Razi.
Thanks. Yeah, I don't know to what extent that is a measure of effectiveness or a measure of the effectiveness of the leftist at whom I tweeted who decided to reply to me, and then and of course that is the reason why this is not my best tweet, by the way. If people follow me on Twitter, Daniel, if you want to put that in the chat, then I think I've done better, but yeah, that's not what matters in terms of what gets viewed. If somebody with 400,000 followers quote tweets you and you know
Yeah.
yeah, disagrees, then their followers will follow. So yeah, that's how the algorithm works. If by the way, if any well-known leftists are watching this show and want to share it as well, please go ahead and do that. And
Please.
yeah, we're not going to invite you on the show if you have views similar to the person
Probably
who quote
not,
tweeted me.
but
There
do
are things.
share.
Yeah, there are things we will debate people on. There are things we won't.
Yeah.
This is one of the cases where I draw the line. But Pooja asks, "What's the stand on hostages as Israel goes into Gaza?" So I think this is one of the reasons. It's definitely one of the reasons why Israel isn't going all in. And depending on what news sources you look at in Israel, you'll hear that maybe that they're not going all in because of this. Maybe they're going in a little bit and devastating some of Hamas's infrastructure as a warning sign, saying, this is worse can come if you don't release the hostages. But yeah, again, Israel's stance is, I don't agree with it. It's this is the most difficult thing about this war, is that you have to fight it as if there are no hostages there. But
No,
yeah, I think if we talk about good news, really good news that could come out of this of any ground operation is the release of any hostages.
the absolute gall and temerity of people saying that Israel's actions are jeopardizing the hostages is simply playing into their strategy. I strike a bunch of I kill more than 1,400 of your civilians, take more than 200 hostages from someone, and then I expect this person to hold back because I've got the hostages. You can't defend yourself adequately because I have the hostages. Anyone who even lets themselves mouth words like Israel is responsible. And I hear from Hamas and its friends saying Israel is to blame for anything that happens to these hostages. That is the complete inversion of morality. That is absolutely disgusting. What you said is true. It is the most painful aspect, in one sense, of all this. The thought of, but look, once they were in these murderous monsters' hands, who knows what was going to happen? They were going to be used either as propaganda tools or that I don't even want to think about the potential of what could happen to them. So the point is, the more we have to think about hostages in the future. Our appeasement and hostage trading up to this point, both Israel and America's, is what caused the hostages to be taken in the first place. The more important value here is to kill the hostage takers so that future hostages, so that future old people and children no longer get kidnapped as bargaining tools.
Yeah, and the cynic in me, and I think he's, his view on this is fact-based, is that certainly a politician like Netanyahu at this stage of his career, where it's pretty much over, doesn't think about the future, because the hostages of the future will be the responsibility of some other prime minister, and if I release these hostages by whatever deal, then yeah, that's a
Wrong approach for Israelis and Americans to be taking about hostages. And we really only fed into this, frankly, with our appeasement.
Yeah, Gail says we don't even know if the hostages are still alive. That's true. I do think Hamas would keep them alive, but of course, Israel is bombing Hamas, and Hamas is, always hidden behind their own civilians. Now they're hiding behind Israeli civilians. So yes, that is true. We don't know if or how many. There, by the latest count, I think it was around 230 hostages. Was it Akira mentioned Roger Waters? Yeah, that might be a topic for a whole other
Whole other
episode.
thing.
but yeah, talk about despicable scumbag.
Despicable. I
Yes.
mean, we've got to separate out the art from the artist sometimes, but the point is, yeah, he is worthy of some attention, let's put it this way. His despicable comments in the past that long precede this, by the way.
Yeah, to his credit, we talk about how, some on the left support Ukraine, but also Hamas, and some on the right support Israel, but also Russia. Uh, yeah, Roger Waters is consistent. He's with Russia.
Consistent.
He's with Hamas. He's with everybody who wants to cause pain, suffering, misery, and death. And yeah, he deserves an episode, but I deserve a nicer Saturday night than thinking about Roger Waters.
Yes.
Thank you, Travis. That super chat made the Saturday night even nicer. And uh for our platinum Reardon Medal and Midas Mulligan members, Saturday night or day or wherever you are is even nicer because the philosophy forum is about to start. James, you are gonna join. We are going to talk about when you should keep your word, when you should break your word.
When you should absolutely break your word and go out of your way to tell people you're breaking your word. Morality is a contextual thing, ladies and gentlemen, and we're going to have a fascinating discussion, but only if you're a platinum member. So please subscribe at the appropriate level because, you're missing out on some good stuff, like I said the other day.
Yes, and our members will forgive me for delaying the start by a few seconds because I'm going to read the comment by Mark Wickens, who has been a member for 15 months. He says, he asks, what's an objective understanding of intifada in the Palestinian conflict, the context? Any plausibility to claims it's meant as non-violent resistance? I mean, no, because it's always, whenever there were two intifadas and both of them were violent. The first one was, mostly rocks and Molotov cocktails and so on. The second was after Israel gave the Palestinians some land to, be able to freely plan operations from. So it involved more terrorist attacks. But
I
no,
don't care if it's
yeah,
rocks. I don't care if it's rocks, it's force. And, if you're aiming at Israeli cops, if you're aiming at Israeli soldiers, I mean, that's violence. And, breaking through fences, well, I just echo what Razi said. It's clearly force.
uh, Frank says, Razi, let's support Geddy Lee of Rush, who is Jewish. Uh, I would need more than that to support him. But we can leave that to tomorrow's episode, and I'll
Okay.
look him up and
I
see
do
if there
love
is any reason to support him other than him being Jewish. We
Well,
had
I
an
do like the
episode
rock group Rush, and he is the frontman. Was the frontman for that group.
Yeah, we had an episode Jews for Palestine a few days ago. So yeah, being Jewish is not automatically a cause for supporting someone, but I assume you had more reason, and we'll talk about it later. All right, we are late for the philosophy forum. Thank you everybody for joining us. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye.
Take care.